Welcome back, everybody. This is part 2 of the series where we're making this hunter handle. So in the first one, in part 1, if you haven't seen it already, I made a bronze guard out of some silicone bronze that I got from Online Metals. And then I fitted on this liner and this handle. This is blue maple burl. And we fitted all this together and it was in a block shape when we left in part 1. In this part, we're gonna be shaping and finishing up this handle and gluing it all together and finishing out the blade. Now I've already started roughly shaping this handle with a 36 grit belt, and I have shaped the guard even more. So I shaped it with a 36 grit belt first, and then I went to 120 grit and started really refining the guard and getting it shaped so that it would be comfortable to hold. So now we're gonna continue that and start shaping the handle at 120 grit with J-Flex belts on the slack belt with the Broadbeck Ironworks grinder, and we're gonna get this thing ready to hand sand. So this is the Broadbeck Ironworks grinder, and I have attached to it right now the J-Flex attachment, or the slack belt attachment with a J-Flex belt on it. Now I get these J-Flex belts from Red Label Abrasives. This is what I mean by it. It can be folded up and squished and all of that, and it has lots of room to be flexed. So it can really get into nice tight corners, and it makes it really ideal for making handles, getting into guards, all that kind of stuff. The lack of support here, this is basically just a platen attachment that I've taken the platen off of, and the lack of support allows it room to flex like that. We're using J-Flex belts. We start at 120 grit, that's what these are, and then we move to 400 grit, which is what those are. And I get those from Red Label Abrasives. So if you're interested in some good belts, check out Red Label Abrasives. So you can actually take these J-Flex belts and you can take them on their seam. So they are put together with a seam, and if you fold right on that seam, take a pair of scissors and cut down the middle, or however narrow you want to make this belt. You can shred it and make 1-inch belts, or you can make a 3/4 inch belt and a 1/4 inch belt, that kind of thing, and that allows you to get into even tighter spaces. For instance, when you're getting into corners like this guard lug, you really want to have something that's going to flex really well. So something even smaller than this might work best for that area. So now I'm using a kind of a 1/4 inch or a little bit bigger, maybe 3/8 belt of 400 grit. All right, so now that we have gotten this blade all sanded to 400 grit on the grinder, now we're gonna hand sand it, all the pieces, except for the guard. I'm actually going to sandblast the guard. You can hand sand it and do all sorts of cool stuff with hand sanding to get a nice finish on your guard, but I like to do blackening on my guards because it's a more durable finish and I think it looks cool. So I'm gonna be sandblasting it and then gun bluing it. Okay, so I'm gonna go straight from 400 grit on the grinder to 800 grit. This is Rhino Wet sandpaper, 800 grit sandpaper. And I'm just gonna sand, you can just use your thumb, you can use rubber tools that, you know, like I've got this rubber tool that I've made. I've glued poundo board on the outside of this kind of a hard rubber. It's all hard rubber, so it's kind of flexible, and you can kind of get into contours, and so this is a really good tool for sanding a little more rigidly than your thumb or finger. So this gives some structure when you're sanding against facets. You want to sand against facets and keep those facets clean and pronounced. You don't want to wash out your facets that you've put in on the grinder. You can also lock this in a vise. If you have a good vise, you can lock your knife in a vise to work on it. But a lot of times this works out for me just fine. So when you're hand sanding a handle like this, you want to make sure you sand out any facets that aren't supposed to be there, or go back to the grinder to get rid of them if it's a real dramatic facet. And you want to get rid of any 120 grit scratches that are left in there from the previous grit. So I think everything was sanded pretty well up to 400 grit, so I think it's ready for buffing. Now I'm going to sand this liner, just make it nice and clean. Actually, you probably want to use something with a little more structure than my hand, so I'm going to use this tool. All right, so that has cleaned that up pretty well. Fits nicely on there, feels good. So it fits nicely on up to the guard. So all I need now is to buff this handle, and then I'm going to blacken the guard as well. And then we need to finish the blade out. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. I think I've shown this on my channel before, but this is the Broadbeck Ironworks buffing wheel attachment that they make for their grinders. And I'm using this Maverick white buffing compound that I got from Pop's Knife Supply. I think you can get some from Broadbeck Ironworks now, but not sure. So go check out both of those. So we're just going to buff up this handle. And if we see any scratches, then we will go back to hand sanding and then come back. So that's how that works. The belt drives the buffing wheel, and so you have variable speed on this bad boy. You can turn it up or you can turn it down. Super, super nice. Very, very handy. Oh yeah, that's looking pretty darn nice. Like I said, it has that kind of, it looks like Van Gogh Starry Night. I'm really happy with that. Put a little more compound on there. I try not to go against any sharp edges. Always go away from those edges. So I am extremely happy with this. It looks super, super nice. So next is the guard. Okay, so now that I have sandblasted this guy, we can spray some gun glue on it. So I try and keep this from getting stuck, this stuff on my skin, because it's probably not good for you and it stinks. So try the best I can to keep it from getting on my hand. But you gotta make sure you hit all the sides and let it really darken up. That's what it should look like. But we're not done there. So now I'm taking this green Scotch-Brite pad and I'm going to rough up the bronze to reveal some of that bronze look again that I wanted. And this is a finish you can stick with. You can stay with this finish. I kind of like it actually for this one. Or you can go back over it after this with gun blue and use a finer Scotch-Brite to make it a little blacker with just some slight bronze accents. For this, I think I'm gonna leave a little more bold. So this gives you that nice antique look, kind of patinaed bronze look, really quickly. All right, I like that a lot. Got a nice bronze, patinaed bronze look. I really like the white spacer. And I think it'll really pop when that blade is etched. Really, really love it. So now we're going to hand sand this blade and get it up to 800 grit and ready for etching. Now we're going to etch this blade with a cotton ball and some ferric chloride. I'm going to etch the edges, etch the blade and the clip so it's nice and black. I do this because it leaves a nice shiny finish up top without, if I just dipped it, it would make the whole blade really satiny, and I don't really like that. Both sides. So now I have sprayed it down really well with Windex, original formula Windex with ammonia. That kills the acid. And then we're going to be using mineral oil to protect the blade. That should protect the blade pretty well. If you do get some yellowing in this white band, then just go back over that process and you should be able to get rid of it. You can also take some Wicked Wax. It's a very simple formula wax that stays nice and gooey, and that allows for a really nice protection on your blade. Cover the whole thing, and then when you go to glue your blade, it'll be nice and protected, and you shouldn't have any problems with gunk on your blade or anything like that. This is also really good for protecting your blade when you're shipping. So if you're shipping knives out to anybody, like customers or anybody, Wicked Wax is the way I protect my blades for my customers. Just for reference, here's an example of some sanmai that I did, and I etched it with a dip etch. I did it because the core comes up higher, and so you might as well just dip the whole thing, but you can see it leaves less of a shiny luster on this stainless up here. And it also leaves the maker's mark a little less black. So I prefer the other way, but sometimes it's kind of unavoidable, and it can be a cool look in and of itself. So you can actually use a clamp like this, a big clamp like this, and tighten up all those fittings so they're nice and jam up and jelly bean tight. And just make sure you don't push it too far or you'll bend your tip or something like that. Because these have a lot of pressure, you can squeeze too far. So now we're going to clip these just like that to get it down to the minimum we can get with these dikes. And then we're going to head over to the grinder, grind it down nice and small, and then we're going to peen it on both sides with that tool right there in the vise. So we're going to tap, 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 tap until it's nice and domed on both sides, and then we're going to buff it to make it nice and shiny. So we're just going to place this side of the pin on the top of that peening shoe, is what I call this, and then we're going to tap this side. And we don't want to do it unevenly, so we're going to do that side, and then we're going to move to this side. And we're just going to keep doing that until it's nice and domed on both sides. You want to do it as symmetrically as you can. And that's all there is to it. So now we're just going to take it over to the buffing wheel and buff the heck out of that pin, and then it's done. I'm buffing it from all sides so that there's no sharp edges. And that's it. And that's it. Now we have a nice shiny little button on both sides. So now we just need to sharpen it and it's all done. This is just a 400 grit belt. I'm putting a fine edge on it. It's a worn out 400 grit belt. And we're just going to use this. This is a easy lap sharpener. I'm going to protect the guard with my finger. I'm just going to do a few strokes back and forth until it starts to cut hair, and that's a pretty good edge for a hunter. So another good test if you're running out of arm hair is just newspaper. If you cut through it and it cuts fairly cleanly, you know you've got a pretty good edge. If it catches somewhere, you know you've got a place where you need to get a bit more sharp. Alright y'all, that's it for this project. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really happy with how it came out. If you haven't seen part 1, make sure you click the video at the end of this to see part 1 and how I did the guard process on this. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up button down below and subscribe if you aren't already. All that stuff really helps me, and I really appreciate it. Also, check out my Patreon if you're interested in more in-depth tutorials on how I make the knives that I make. There's a link in the description below. I'll see you guys on the next one.